Hi, I'm Ibby and you're listening to Kill the Cat. On this episode, we're talking about The Nice Guys and how to make great comedy by subverting audience expectations. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen it already, go check it out. Otherwise, enjoy the episode.
Let's talk about The Nice Guys.
Yeah. So I think for me, I had seen this film advertised when it was in cinemas, didn't go see it, and then about 2 years later, I was sitting at home, I saw it come up and I was like, I'm going to watch this. And it pretty much became instantly like one of my favorite movies. It's just super funny. I then basically told everyone and who I knew and who would listen to me that they should watch it. I think I watched it about like 4 times in the space of like a month, and have since watched it like another 10 times. Absolutely love this movie. I think I then gave you the DVD.
You did, and I had it for like a year. And then I finally watched it. And I should have watched it much, much earlier.
Yeah.
Because it is hilarious. It's such a funny movie.
Just in terms of a comedy, like everything I want a comedy to be, this is that, while then also just being like a really great thriller. And we'll talk a bit more about like those sort of genre things. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of really effective writing, really effective characters. Overall, just kind of across the spectrum, it just really nails.
Just ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies where wherever you go back and watch it, you pick up more, which I always think is great. Or like there are moments, because so much happens, like you forget happened in your first viewing and you get to enjoy them all over again.
Yeah.
Also, I had an interesting experience when I first watched this. I watched it by myself, still laughed, had a great time. And then I watched it with people the second time.
Yeah.
And I kind of forgot that there's moments where you don't really know whether to gasp or laugh. Moments we'll get to. Spoilers, by the way. We're just going to ruin the whole movie.
Basically, the entire movie, we're going to tell you everything that happens.
If you haven't seen it, go watch it and then come back and listen to this episode. So basically today we wanted to break down why this movie is so funny. I don't think either of us had really seen this comedy done before. To this extent, or done this well before. And
I think so consistently throughout the movie. Like, there's definitely movies, and, I think Shane Black, who wrote and directed this one, he did Iron Man 3 and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which we've both seen. There are moments throughout those films where you can see this sort of similar comedy stylings come through, but I think this movie just kind of carries that the whole way.
Yes.
Yeah. So why don't we talk to start about this sort of how the movie starts? Because I think the way the movie sets up its rules and its world and its characters is really quite brilliant. It's super efficient. In the first 3.5, 4 scenes, we're given these really great glimpses. So scene 1, is this
what a scene.
Ridiculous scene. A kid sneaks a porn mag out of his parents' bedroom and is looking at it, and there's this porn star, Misty Mountains. As he's walking down the hallway, her car just happens to crash through his house, and she ends up flung out of the car, lying in his backyard in a very similar pose to what he's just seen her in the magazine, and she then dies after saying, "How do you like my car, big boy?" which is, a phrase.
What an introduction to a movie.
What an intro to a movie.
And it just sets up this world and the tone of the film so well. So this movie has really particular rules on how it operates. And if anyone out there is a screenwriter or looking to direct a film, it is good to have rules like this in your script. Every film has them. So one of my favorite kind of rules in this screenplay is that it's unpredictable and there will be coincidence, and that's really unusual for a detective style film to lean so heavily on coincidence.
I think something I love about how it leans on coincidence though, and it sets it up well at the start, is it says there's going to be coincidence in this movie. The kid's going to be looking at the magazine and then she's going to burst through his house, but it's going to be done in a way that is super funny and super comedic, and it's going to be done in a way that's worth you just going along for the ride with. And I think you see that in the future of just like every other time something like that happens, later on in the film where they're looking for Amelia and they've just gone to like the building where she's meant to be at, and they've run away because John Boy is there, and
there's a big fight and it's too scary for the tough detectives.
So they're just like, no. March is just saying, she's dead, it's done, there's nothing, and she falls onto their car roof.
Yes.
It's just, she appears, and you're like, what the heck? And then she goes to shoot them, ends up knocking herself out.
Yes.
And so it's always done in a sense of humor when they lean into these just random coincidences, but it is set up as sort of one of the rules of the movie.
Yeah, and there's actually a nice moment at the end where she's like lying prone and she's topless, like in the photo, and the kid just takes his shirt and just covers her up. And it's like, there will also be nice moments in the script. There will be a little bit of sentimentality. Not a lot. It will mostly be ridiculous and hilarious.
Yeah.
But there is this kind of underlying tone of sincerity going on there as well, which really, really works for this.
Yeah. I think, so going back to our opening of the movie, the next scene then cuts to this sort of like educational video where that's happening in a school, and the voiceover is Healy telling us about how essentially, kids know too much these days, which sets up another rule of the film, which is that there's really no innocence and kind of anyone can be a part of this world. Like, kids are not protected from it.
And kids really talk like adults in this world. You mostly see it through March's daughter, Holly. She speaks like an adult and he's kind of the child.
And I think that also leads into the other rule of just like, no one is innocent in this film.
No, anyone can die. We see I think she's about 12-year-old girl get thrown through a window. Bystanders get shot and killed. Which I shouldn't be laughing at, because it's one of those moments like, is this shocking or is this funny? And it's kind of both.
Yeah.
I think you laugh because you're shocked.
Are you thinking the scene, because there's a scene where Blueface...
It happens twice.
Yeah.
They kill bystanders twice.
Because I think the first scene is Blueface is in Healy's house and he goes to shoot him, but he's been blinded by the light suddenly coming on, and it just cuts to like this window across the road, and there's a lady who's just like, and
she gets shot. Yeah.
That's how the movie happens.
And also impressed like how much of these things happen in long shots or in the background. So when you see Misty Mountain's car, the first time you see it, it's in the background.
It's through a window in the background.
And it's this moment of like,
flies off a cliff.
Did I just see that? Did I? What was that? And then it crashes through the house.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have no one's innocent, kids know too much. A lot of this movie is based around porn, which is where a lot of the parody kind of comes from, and the humor, because it's not murder, it's not the mafia, it's porn, it's the porn industry.
Yeah. Something I only realized recently, I don't know if I've even mentioned this to you, but so there's the underlying, the world is currently concerned with climate change, and that sort of reflects a concern that was there in the 70s. But one of the things is the animals that are affected by climate change are the birds and the bees.
I have not picked that up before.
I only picked up on my last watch. I was like, that's just brilliant. Like, that's such a subtle detail that just so perfectly fits.
That's so good.
So we then move into scene number 3, which is kind of an extension off of the video that the kids are watching and laughing at, because one of the kids in the video has a gay towel, which is just a rainbow coloured towel.
Which makes everyone laugh, of course.
Yeah, because teenagers. But we get introduced to Healy, and he basically punches this dude in the face who's like in his late 30s and is seeing this underage girl.
She's 13. It's very creepy. And going back to that thing of like, no one's innocent. And this girl is like, it feels kind weird to see it. Yeah, she's a victim, obviously, but she's playing the part of, she's playing Lolita.
Yeah.
She's smoking weed willingly.
Yeah.
It's that kind of world.
And so we see that, Healy is tough, he's quick, and he's super professional. But we also kind of get this sense that, he's got somewhat of a moral center, right? Like he's trying to do right by the world. Russell Crowe talks about, in one of his interviews, about the fact that for him, kind of the backstory of Healy is that he's quite displaced. Like, he's not from LA. He's sort of trying to find where he fits into everything and just is struggling to do so. And I think you kind of see, at least I feel like I kind of see a little bit of that in his character. Like, he talks about how people kind of look for him when there's certain things that need doing, because he's someone who can do them.
Yeah, and he also has like a very strong professional code as well, which comes up quite a lot. But we see this teenager, Amelia, who becomes important later, is paying him for a job. She's really scared. There's a stalker after her. And he interrupts her and says, "You're short $7," and makes her fork up like $7.
Yeah.
So moral center, but it's really, really strong professional code. So he's more of the classic noir detective that we know. And then we meet March.
Yeah. Introduction to March is that he's in a bathtub in a full suit, and he wakes up after being very drunk the night before. He gets out of the bath as the answering machine is playing, and it's a call from his daughter basically telling him to not forget her birthday later on. And, you know, we see that he's just this kind of pathetic guy. Like, he's let life get him down. He's struggling to sort of keep work going. He's just not what you'd want from a private detective, like a private eye.
No, and it's funny because like a lot of those things you just said are kind of traits of the classic neo-noir detective and film noir detectives, except for the pathetic bit.
Yeah.
They're not usually this pathetic. Like he has written on his hand, "You will never be happy."
Yeah. Which then turns around to be quite nice at the end.
It does.
Where they
It's
cross
that
out the
idea
never.
of like that little bit of sentimentality at the end.
Yeah, and it also sets up the interesting relationship between him and Holly.
Yes.
Where Holly is really more of the adult in their relationship. Her mother is out of the picture, and so it's just him and her. But you constantly see her, you know, she's the one driving the car, even though she is definitely not old enough to be
She's
driving
13,
a car.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just constantly things like this where she is trying to look out for him and sort of keep him afloat as he sort of continues his spiral. But all of these scenes, they happen in, you know, I think it's maybe like 8 minutes.
It's definitely like those first 10 pages you need to grab your reader and establish your world. Like Shane Black just does that so well with those 4 scenes.
So efficiently done. I think one of the other rules that we'd like to talk about, maybe you want to jump on this, is just like the role that luck plays in this.
So when we actually started talking about this, so we both play Dungeons and Dragons, and a key element of Dungeons and Dragons is luck. You can't just say, "I want to do this," and you can do it. You have to roll a dice. And it honestly feels like these characters are playing D&D. They have dice. And March somehow is very like low level and keeps rolling like natural 20s.
Basically. I think March is a bard.
Oh, I saw that in your notes.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons fans will get this. But March is definitely a bard.
He is a bard. I haven't decided what Healy is.
Listeners, write in and tell us what kind of D&D character is Healy.
I don't know where you need to write in, but write in. But the whole thing, and you know, it comes back to that no one is protected from anything when Tilly...
Yes, who's the femme fatale character.
Yeah, when she's holding them at gunpoint, she slips on coffee and knocks herself out, and that's how they get out of that situation. She rolls a natural 1 and suddenly is out of the situation. And things like that constantly happening. As you said, March seems to just keep rolling natural 20.
He even has a line where he goes, "I think I'm invincible."
Yeah.
It's the only explanation.
And what I love about that is the movie gets meta enough and self-aware enough to address it. Because he falls off a building and lands in a pool.
And he pulls a bad guy off with him who hits the pavement. It's one of the most gruesome like scenes of the movie. But I think the reason luck works is it works for and against them. So there's a scene where they're driving along and Blueface just gets hit by a car. Like it's not established. The car is not a character we know. I think they just go like, "Oh shit," and then they drive off. That works for them. And then later, Amelia's running away and she runs straight into the guy who's just driven off, who's trying to kill her.
Yeah,
and that just
shoots her, and that's it.
That just
Amelia's gone.
happens to be the guy she's flagged down for, right? So yeah, for and against, and I think mostly against them.
Yeah, which keeps it interesting, which keeps us on our toes as an audience, which keeps us guessing. You know, we never know what's actually going to happen, which I don't know that that's something that I necessarily see frequently in comedies and like mysteries. There's definitely always the twist in sort of your thrillers and mysteries, but this is far more unpredictable, I'd say.
And I think part of that is like, as screenwriters, we are very much taught like everything must have a reason, everything must come out of character choice, and all of that is good advice. It's just something that Shane Black has not done here, except sometimes he does.
Well, I think he does it, right? Like everything is motivated.
Yes.
But just most things don't work.
Yes.
Is his approach. And I think that's just a really interesting approach to have. You know, there's the classic idea of, you know, subversion of expectations, and that's how you write comedy, right? And so we see that heaps, right?
Yes.
Oh, you have some examples written down.
I do. Okay, so we kind of boiled all this down, and once the rules of this world have been established and kind of the genres, so it's an action, it's a film noir, it's a buddy comedy, and that comes with certain tropes. So we have the femme fatale, we have the damsel in distress, the mismatched pairings of the lead characters, so we have all of that. So it takes all those expectations, and I think like 90% of the comedy in this movie just comes from subverting those expectations. Because that's what laughter is. You see something you don't expect and you laugh.
I've heard it put, like in terms of the psychology of laughter, it's something to do with having a safety around dealing with the unexpected, right?
Yes.
Like something that just shouldn't happen or really juxtaposes what you'd expect, but you're safe in that situation. You know, we're watching a movie and laughter is sort of this reaction to it. Because we just don't know how to process it otherwise.
Yeah, I think, and a really good example is when the bystanders get shot.
Yeah.
And you don't really know how to process that, so you laugh.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about like some of the ways expectations get subverted. So we can start with the idea of like the tropes and things we've seen before. Just things we've seen time and time again in movies. And Shane Black takes that and just gives it completely new outcomes. And this comes really early on. It's this scene where March is trying to punch through a window.
Well, so I love the scene before that, right?
Okay.
So the lead up to that scene is he's asking about Amelia, and he goes into this bar where she was seen, and he talks to the bartender, and he's like, you know, have you seen this girl? Can you pull the credit card? Like that kind of thing. And the bartender basically says no. And so March has this little folded t-shirt that is made out of a $20 bill or something like that he kind of like walks over to the bartender and like, you know, tries to bribe him. And the bartender's like, oh, nice shirt. And March is like, thanks, I made it myself. And the bartender pulls out this baseball bat. He's like, I made this myself. And that is the end. Yeah. And so March attempts to break in. And then...
We've all seen the scene in the movie where someone's trying to get through a window. They wrap their hand in cloth and they punch through the window so they don't get cut. March wraps his hand, but not his wrist. Punches through, slices open his wrist, and then we just smash... Okay, actually, we linger with him for a while.
Yeah.
Just
oh, that's a lot of blood.
Then we just smash cut to him in this ambulance.
Oh.
So there's just so much of this, like... So another one is in the shootout, when John Boy has come to kill Amelia.
Yeah.
So Healy's crouching by the window, and March comes over, and Healy's like, March, throw me a gun. And March goes to throw him a gun. Again, a scene we've seen so many times, and March totally mistimes it and just throws it out the window. Like it's not even close.
Yeah. Oh, even when they're in the final big shootout, and March hides behind the car, and he's like psyching himself up to like get up and shoot the guys on the other side. But the car is on a rotating platform, and by the time he psychs himself up, he is facing guys, and they just start shooting at him. It's all this kind of stuff that you just don't expect your characters to be in that situation, or for it to fail that badly.
Or arguably the best joke in the movie, which is when they're going up the elevator, and they're prepping you for a big fight scene.
Like a showdown.
Like John Wick style. They're going to go in, they're going to save the girl, they're going to fight everyone. They literally go in, see the amount of violence that's happening, just
step back into the elevator,
and then go back down.
Meanwhile, a guy flies out the back, and this is another one of those, like, it happens in the wide shot, like, just in the background, a guy goes flying out the window and down the building.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we getting at? Because this whole podcast could just be us talking about our favourite moments of this movie.
We could just quote the entire movie,
we could.
And that would be a great podcast. We're talking about the subversion of expectation. I think another thing the movie does is it subverts its own subversions.
Yes.
And so we're going to stay on this point a little bit longer. You know, it's not only enough for Shane Black to sort of write in these scenes where things are constantly failing, but he'll do that and then flip it again. So one example is when Tilly is holding March and Healy at gunpoint, and Holly tries to come in and help them. She lets Holly in, and then Holly throws the coffee at her.
Yes.
But it's cold.
Yes.
And so it doesn't do anything. And so you go, oh no, great plan. I like where your head's at, Holly, but doesn't work. But then she slips on the coffee and knocks herself out. And so instantly we've got this other flip, and the two guys are just left dumbfounded as to like, oh, okay. And they just pick up their guns and go. When Amelia, and I mentioned this before, but you know, when they're looking for Amelia after that elevator scene and they've run away and they're like, Amelia's dead, and she falls down, and you're like,
yes,
what? How did that happen? And then she tries to shoot them and knocks herself out again. You've instantly flipped the situation again. You just never know when the subversion's going to stop.
The cleverest one, I actually think it's a big plot point, is, okay, so constantly we've seen March get drunk and be incompetent, just over and over again. And we have this scene where the bad guy, he's taken Holly hostage, and he comes over to March, he's like, I've got a gun, pointing at your daughter's spine, and March turns around and he's just plastered. He's so drunk, and they take him up to the roof. He starts like crying, he's like, I'm so sorry, and Holly's embarrassed, and then he's just like, duck. So he's not drunk at all. He's actually being smart for one of the first times in the movie. And it works. And that's kind of nice because it shows like character growth while getting that comedy from subverting the expectation that March will fail. Yeah.
And I think that's something I do love about March is he is the incompetent one in this.
So incompetent.
So like, yeah. And that's comedic in itself, right? Like that's good comedy writing, you know, have a character with flaws. But he does have a lot of growth. Every time he figures out a plot point or moves the story forward in terms of the mystery they're trying to solve, it is through dumb luck. Oh, yes. Until the third act of the film, where he actually starts genuinely figuring things out. He figures out why Misty's grandmother saw her in this window, and it's because there was another copy of the film that had been on the projector on the wall in there. And he figures all of that out by himself like a good detective, and that's the first time we see him do anything like that in the film.
Immediately followed by him completely putting his foot in it when the poor grandmother's like, does this mean my granddaughter is dead? March says yes in celebration.
Yeah, keeping the audience guessing, never letting them get the sort of upper hand, and never letting them find a place where they can expect what's actually going to happen.
And there's no point where you can call what's going to happen in this film.
No.
I think one of the most ridiculous jokes, and another like great one, is March falls asleep at the wheel of the car and has a dream. And later, he thinks he's going to save them by going for Healy's ankle gun, and he dreamt it.
So when I first watched that scene, I rewound the movie and went back to the scene with the thing in the car, because I was like, wait, no, he didn't dream that. That wasn't that. And it was. And I came back and like, he dreamt that. And then March in the movie says, wait, did I dream that? And I think that's one of those like beautiful just setups for just a payoff you don't expect.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
And another way it subverts our expectations is it plays with the genre a lot. So you had a really good point that it's a great comedy and a great noir at the same time, and it manages to pull those off really well. And I think a lot of what it's doing, and you actually see this not quite as well, but it is done in Shane Black's other film, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, is it takes the film noir and it parodies a lot of its elements. So one of my favourite ones is the damsel in distress is Amelia. That character is usually kind of like sultry and pathetic and sad. She's just kind of she's an idiot. She's an annoying teenager. Yeah. And she's set up to be that. Like, she's wearing the gorgeous evening gown and she's beautiful and she's mysterious. She's so annoying. Yeah. Just not that bright. Yeah. It is set up as a noir. Like, it has the voiceover, it has the saxophone. It's set in the 70s.
Even the way it's filmed is, I mean, not super traditional noir, but is reminiscent of those 70s noirs.
Yes.
Totally. You mentioned there about how it kind of almost parodies the noir genre. And I think what I appreciate is that I do see that sort of parody where it sort of bends the genre and sort of tries to give us a fresh take, and especially leaning into some of the comedy of the movie really comes from it, sort of subverting the genre. But what I appreciate is that it isn't a parody. Like, it still holds true to the genre, I would say, more so than sort of ripping it up. Like, if you look at like Shaun of the Dead or something like that, it's a very clear parody, and brilliant film in its own right. But when you look at this, I don't feel like I'm watching a parody of a noir film. I'm watching a noir comedy.
Yes. It shouldn't work, really, when you think about it.
No, it
Noir
really shouldn't.
comedy should not work.
No, but it's been bent enough that it works really, really well.
Yeah, and I think it takes, again, going back to like normal scenes that we would see in a classic detective film. One of my favourite ones is March gets this like clue, and he's like, it's the airport, obviously, and March does this full Sherlock Holmes style detective rundown, and they just smash cut, and he's wrong. He's totally wrong when they go to the airport.
Yeah. Which then is another one of those subversions, because you think, oh, they go to the airport, but then it's still not at the airport. So no one was right. But by dumb luck, they found where they needed to be.
And I think that's quite refreshing as well. We do see characters make mistakes in movies, but usually it's a fatal mistake. Or it takes the plot somewhere. And then usually in The Nice Guys, like, they just mess up.
Yeah.
Like when March falls off the balcony.
And finds the body.
So he's just flirting with the girl, like pretending to let her shoot him, and then he takes it a bit far and he just falls down this hill and discovers the next clue.
That for me is one of my favourite scenes. And I think Ryan Gosling was really impressive in this movie. I think we were talking before this, but you mentioned like that's actually another one of these things that's kind of subverting your expectations, because Ryan Gosling is not like, he's not someone who you would imagine doing physical comedy like he does. He's the handsome man that plays in these romantic comedies.
Yeah, like The Notebook and stuff.
Yeah, those kind of films. And so you come to expect this from Ryan Gosling, but then all of a sudden he's this PI.
Yes.
With just a hilarious sense of comedic timing. And he nails it, like performs everything so well. His scream when Healy breaks his arm, brilliant. Like,
actually, that's another thing. Like, that's like an ongoing thing. The way that he screams and like squeals, like he gets out, he's like Jesus, just this high pitched voice. Again, Ryan Gosling, brilliant casting, because you just don't expect that.
It's like the most inspired choice, and he works so well with Russell Crowe. Something that I really liked about their characters and the way the characters are written, and there's this idea, and I think I read it in Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, which maybe is what we rip on a little bit with Kill the Cat, the name of the podcast. But there's this idea that one of the keys to comedy is you have, or one of the ways to do comedy is you put like this crazy character in a really normal world and watch the sort of chaos. So that happens in movies like Elf, where you've got this guy who thinks he's an elf, but he's a human, just trying to interact with the world. Or even Enchanted does this, where you've got Amy Adams' character trying to interact with the normal world, and just the juxtaposition is quite funny. The other way you do it is you put a really normal character into kind of a crazy world. Like Shaun of the Dead is an example of that.
Right.
Really normal person, but in this insane world, and just having to somehow deal with that. What I think this movie kind of does is it takes the crazy character, and I think that's March. He's super incompetent. He doesn't really belong in this world as such, and it takes the really normal, like the straight character of Healy, who belongs in this noir world. And the world then just shifts. And so I feel like it's always on one of their sides. So the big party scene, the world's kind of crazy. And for Healy, he's kind of out of his depth. And we find a lot of comedy in that, right? Like when he smacks the guy's head into the table for showing Holly, like the porn film. And then the lady's like, what? No, I'm showing her.
Yeah, it's like, you shouldn't be watching this scene. She goes, watching it? I'm in it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Or even just like Healy putting his glass on what he thinks is a table, and it's some performer who's in this weird pose, which I do love. You see someone else do that in the background of another show. Yeah, there's like an old guy who does it. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But then you look at like March, and he's so at home in that world. He's chasing mermaids in the pool. What were you doing in the pool? I had to question the mermaids. And so I think those kind of, having the two characters who are so different really allows you to do whatever you want with the world, because you're always going to have comedy coming from it. And that's another one of these things that really just subverts expectations, which I think overall, it all kind of comes back to just like really messing with your audience and not letting them see what's coming.
Beyond that though, it's not just that, like every scene drives forward character, it drives forward plot. Both protagonists have an arc, which is nice. Again, going back to the idea of like the kid covering Mr. Mount with the shirt at the end, is just that little bit of sentimentality. And I think it makes the climax of the movie, which is March thrusting the film up into the air, and the voiceover line is, "Sometimes you just win."
Yeah.
And that sums up the movie like really nicely. So to finish off, when I first saw this movie, it reminded me of another Shane Black film, which is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And in a lot of ways, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer almost feels like a practice run for this movie.
Yeah, so I only watched this Kiss Kiss Bang Bang today.
Yes.
In preparation for this. I was meant to watch it last week. But it definitely felt like that. Like, there's moments where you see the same kind of comedy, and there's moments where you see there was these dynamics going for, but the script isn't as tight.
No.
It doesn't nail the comedy, I don't think. Like, it definitely feels like the things they got right in that movie, they then just made this movie lots more of that.
Because it has a similar setup. Like, Robert Downey Jr. plays Harry, who's kind of the March of that film, and Val Kilmer is Perry, which is sort of the Russell Crowe of that film.
Yeah.
One of the better moments in it is Harry, who's Robert Downey Jr.'s character, gets shot, and he pulls this paperback novel out that he's been carrying around nearly the whole movie, which has taken the bullet, but it hasn't stopped it. It's still gone through the book into his chest. So there are moments of that comedy, and we see it again in another Shane Black movie, which is Iron Man 3. He uses similar humour. I think the best example of that is Tony Stark is calling a piece of his Iron Man suit to him, and he's like, "You're going to be so sorry in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1," which in any action movie, then the glove would come soaring in. Nothing happens.
Especially in the Avengers movies.
Especially in the Avengers movie.
In an Avengers movie.
Neither of these movies really pull off what The Nice Guys does, but it is a very Shane Black thing to do, to set up your expectations, to play on tropes.
I do find it interesting. For me, Iron Man 3 was my favourite.
Really?
Of the 3 Iron Mans.
That film annoys me because it's a film that should work. Because it's a film in which Tony Stark loses everything. And like, it has a good setup. So he loses his house, then Jarvis, then his suit, then Rhodey, then Pepper. And the whole point of the movie is like him trying to exist outside the Iron Man suit and be like, "I'm more than this." But then it ends up in a big fight where he uses like 20 Iron Man suits. Great premise for an Iron Man movie. I feel like if that movie had been made a bit later in Phase 3, they would have gone all the way. Yeah. And just committed to
I do think it is what I liked about that movie, more so than the plot, was the characterization of Iron Man. Like, I think Iron Man, just as a person, is a bit of a jerk in the first 2 movies. And that's his character. Totally the point. But I found it really refreshing to see him, dealing with anxiety and dealing with loss.
And I did like that. I just wish they'd taken it further. Yeah. And that has another kid who talks like an adult as well, who is the same kid from the opening of The Nice Guys.
Is it actually?
It is.
No way. I did not know that.
It's the kid from Iron Man 3.
There you go.
When Shane one Black, of the most famous lines from that movie is like something about, that must have been 6 years ago because my dad hasn't come back. And Tony Stark just goes, "Yeah, dads do that sometimes. Don't need to be a pussy about it." Which is a very Nice Guys line.
Yeah, that would definitely happen in The Nice Guys. So yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode. We're releasing episodes once a month. If you want to follow us, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat.
We're back with Subverting Your Expectations. Cut.